happens. You know, it's started up every time.
Oh wow, look at it. Yeah.
Is this the problem right here?
Yes.
So was the left track moving too when you're dragging it, if you had this forward?
Yeah.
So it is unlocking. So the brake is coming off.
It's not seized, the brake's coming off, it's just not giving it enough pressure, or there's too much, like, I don't know, blow by for it to get by inside the motor, I don't know.
Got charge pressure. It's exciting. All right. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. It's full pressure right there, baby. Woo! We just put a ratchet strap right around here right now. Man, I can't believe that. I guess. You want to just manhandle this down?
Just get out of the way. I'm just gonna release this. It's good.
So far the only damage I really see is this bearing is just disintegrated. The thing that worries me the most though is that there's only 4 balls that go into it. So we're definitely missing some of those. I have a feeling this is going to be a pretty hard bearing to get on here too, because there's a really heavy spring right here. And we got to pull that off there and then press a new one on. So a quick update on what's going on. In the last video, I mentioned that I had a place that would rebuild this, but it would take a month and around $3,000 depending. Could be more, probably not less though. So I actually called another place. I called many places, but there wasn't really anybody that wanted to take on this job. But I did find one more place that was more local and I could drive there. It was still a few hours, but at least I could drive there and not have to ship it. They seemed very promising to rebuild this, and then they checked into it and they said most likely they can't do anything but get the OEM seals for here. And the seal kit for this drive motor, believe it or not, you want to be sitting down when you hear this, but the seal kit for this motor is $900. And there's 2 seals in here. They're floating seals. There's 2 of them. And if you buy them separately, they're $700 a piece. And then that's just those 2 seals. And there's a bunch of other seals that you need too. A whole bunch of O-rings and some bearings and all kinds of stuff. So for me to reseal this whole drive motor and put new bearings in the whole thing, we're looking at like $1,500 in parts just for bearings and seals. And we're not talking anything special here. Just regular bearings. The floating seal, yes, it's a pretty big seal, but it's not worth that kind of money. So, long story short, the first place that was going to rebuild this was going to try to use seals that they got from other places that weren't from Takeuchi. And so that end of it was going to be cheaper. This other place, the local place, said that they couldn't do that and they have to get the seals from Takeuchi. So right off the bat, we're looking at that kind of money plus whatever labor they put in it. And they said 2 weeks at first, but then they said it was more like a month. So we're looking at kind of the same thing, maybe even more money when we're done. So I just decided that I'm just going to rebuild this myself. Let's try to take our time and go through this step by step and get it right. At this point, I have this $15 bearing that's going to go in here, which that's perfectly okay, and I think that that's the only thing that's wrong with anything. But let's just start out with trying to remove this outer bearing race, and I need to remove this inner bearing race, and then let's see where we can go from there. Because even this snap ring right here, which is like a little bit damaged, but I think it's fine, that was back ordered from them, so I can't even get another one. I don't know if this is anything special, but who knows, it definitely could be. I'm just putting this back together because my vise isn't big enough to fit around this, so if I put this back on, then I can hold it easier. In the past, I've had luck welding a bead around the whole thing, and then it pretty much just pops out, but I am worried about getting some spatter all over the place, and yes, I could protect everything, but at the same time, I think I could just use a bearing puller. Oh yeah, that's coming right out. It was just going a little crooked, so just had to kind of correct it, and look at that. Oh, look at that. There's actually a number on the bottom. Well, that's pretty cool. Doesn't do me any good though. I just paid $15 for a new bearing and $110 for overnight shipping. Probably could have got this at Napa though. It's Koyo 6204. Oh well. See, like I said, I could have welded a bead on there, but I just took it out a lot easier with no spattering anywhere, so it's much better. So now we got to get this inner race off, and this is spring loaded, so I'm gonna have to get a little creative with this. I can kind of take some pressure off that spring, but it's not very easy. I don't think any oil seals or bearings touch this part of the shaft, but just in case, I do want some way to hold this. So I couldn't wrap the jaws from the puller around the bottom here because the spring is like even with it, so there's nothing to grab onto. I can grab that inner part of the bearing where the ball slides on, but I don't have the right puller. I know if I just weld around this that this will come off. The problem is this is spring loaded. So as I'm welding, this thing is eventually just going to let go and it's going to fly off of here. And I'd really rather not do that unless I really have to. So I'm going to try to go get some other kind of puller that can not just sit there and pull up, but put force inward as it's pulling up. So I'm sure I can find something at Harbor Freight. I'm just going to go get something real quick and see if I can pop that off the less dangerous way. Alright, so I'm thinking this is probably the best option here. And I know I'm running this kind of upside down, but I think it will do better like that. So I kind of want the flat spot on the top so I can catch it more. And I think if I put it just in the right spot, it'll kind of peel in between the spring and the spacer. Kind of pry the spring down. Yep, so far so good. Yeah, it's doing exactly what I need. Alright, that's exactly what I was looking for. Old Harbor Freight came through. Probably should have just already had one of these anyways, but for some reason I don't. Oh yeah, that was no effort at all. It's popping right out of there. That was nothing. Alright, well that was a lot easier than I thought. Now I just gotta wait for that bearing to come in, and then we'll see how we can assemble this. So I just got the bearing to put this back together. If you look at this, there's a lot of pieces in there just besides the balls that are missing. So that's what I've found so far. So let's see, there's 8 balls altogether. And I have 5 there, plus a bunch of these pieces that I got, which are probably those pieces that go, they're like retainers for the balls. So there's still quite a bit missing, which I'm sure some of it got ground up into fine pieces, and then that went into the strainer. But while I'm here, I want to check to make sure there's nothing else in here. I don't think there is, because there's a seal that would prevent anything from the hydraulic side going into the final drive side. This is the final drive side. So, but I'm here now, so. So these are the brakes, the parking brakes, and I can already see that they are fine. This is the steel part of it, and this is the fiber part. So there's just going to be a bunch of them stacked up here. I don't see a problem with any of that. To be honest with you, they look like they're brand new. That's the swash plate right there. It's at an angle like that, and that's how this motor works. You got these pistons that put pressure down on that swash plate, and then these piston shoes just sort of glide along the surface as it's spinning around. So basically, this is the piston block right here, and it holds these pistons, and they slide in and out of it. And when that's in there, depending on which piston is firing, it turns one way or the other, which in turn turns this drive shaft, which goes through and turns this gear, which goes through and turns this gear on the other side. And when that turns, it turns these gears, and when those gears turn, it hits the housing, which makes the whole thing turn, because it hits these gears on the side here. And that's what gives it such high gearing. So the motor turns really fast, and then this gears it down so it's more powerful. So that motor's spinning like crazy, but it's just kind of going like that. So basically the pressure that's coming out of this piston shoe, when it's on an angled swash plate like this, makes it want to rotate this whole thing. So when the pressure's coming out and it's hitting that angle, it's just making this rotate like this. And then for the parking brake holds on with these little teeth. As you can see on the side, they got the little teeth there. So at this point, I'm ready to reassemble. I've got the hydraulic motor apart as much as it can go. I can get deeper into the final drive, but there's really no point because the metal can't get past the seals that are inside of here to go down into the final drive. So there's really no point in checking the final drive for the metal, although maybe it's a good idea, but it's kind of hard to get into there. Plus you could mess up the seals, and I really don't want to do that because that's $800 for seals, and right now they're working perfectly fine. And if for some reason we get to a point where the fluids are leaking, because you know there's hydraulic fluid here and then there's gear oil on the other side, if they start combining, I will know it because I'll inspect it, and then we can always tear it back out and put in the seals. But for right now, they were never leaking. The fluid that was in here was clean, and the fluid on the other side was black. So if they combined, you would see that they were combining, and it wasn't. So we're just going to leave it the way it is, and I'm going to start reassembling this, and then we're going to test it out because I really don't think I need to get any further into here. So literally, this bearing is all that I need to put on here. That's the only thing that I was missing. Okay, so that's the swash plate. You can see. So basically, in a nutshell, these two are what makes everything move. The pistons, when they shoot liquid from here, it shoots on this side, it makes the drive shaft turn around, and when the fluid shoots from this side through the pistons, it hits this side, it makes the drive shaft go the other way. So these two are stationary, they never move from each other. The things that move are in between, that's the piston block and the pistons. That moves, which moves the drive shaft. These two are keyed so they can't move, so they're always in relation to each other, and then everything else in between them moves. So it's kind of neat how it works. So I do have some magnetic material down there. I'm going to get that out. So not really much. Probably not enough to really hurt anything, but still worth getting it out. So this surface right here is one that you don't want to scratch up because the pistons ride on that, the piston shoes. They ride on that, but they always have a buffer of oil between them because there's always oil shooting out, so it creates like almost like a bearing kind of. So it always has a film on it so that it doesn't scratch anything. There is some very minor scratching on here. I don't know if you can see it, but it's not enough to worry about. The bottom has a bunch of scratching, but that doesn't matter.
Hey, tell us where you are.
I'm in the garage. Huh? Because I'm trying to fix my skid steer.
Oh, you can't fix this just here.
Oh, thank you. So let me explain where I'm at right now. I actually completely assembled this drive, and I filmed everything, but I realized something right at the end, and so now I'm redoing everything. So let me show you what happened here. So this is the snap ring that holds in this spring, and there's this spacer, they call it a spacer, but it's like a big washer that goes on top of the spring, and then this snap ring, or retaining ring, internal, holds this in the piston block, just like so. And there's a groove inside of the piston block right there that the snap ring snaps into. Well, when I took this apart, I didn't realize it until basically I got it all assembled. But this snap ring must have let go this spring, because the snap ring, when I took everything out, was all the way up here on top of the spring. So I'm 99.9% sure that what happened was this snap ring, for one reason or another, and we'll get into that in a little bit, let go of that spring. That spring pushed up on this bearing and started giving this bearing some thrust pressure. This bearing is not meant to take thrust pressure. So by that spring pushing up on the inner race and possibly a little bit of the internals of this bearing, completely destroyed this bearing. The old one anyways, this is the new one. So that spring was just pushing up on that bearing with a lot of force, and eventually it just wore it down. Probably because the balls were pushed sideways, which they're not meant to be, and it eventually ate the ball retainers in there, and then some of the balls fell out, and then the rest of the drive ate that. So I got this all back together, and of course you can't buy this snap ring anymore. I tried to get it and it was back ordered, and then when they went to actually order it from the back order, they said no, it's no longer available. And I'm like, well, can you just give me the specs on it at least? No, we can't do that. There's nothing in here about it. Seems to be typical for this machine in this company. So I got looking online and I started taking some measurements, and I started measuring the thickness of it. It kind of varies because it's worn down. See, that's a little bit thinner than normal. Normally this one should be 1.75 millimeters. That's the thickness. Okay, so then it's meant to fit inside of a 38.5. Well, 39. I figured it was past 39 millimeters, so I called it a 40 millimeter bore. And that's how you actually buy snap rings, is by the bore that it fits into. That's for internal snap rings anyways. And you can tell it's an internal snap ring by the fact that the tabs point inward, not outward, so that would fit inside of a bore. So 40 millimeter bore, 1.75 millimeter thickness, and that's pretty much all you really need to know. The rest of it's kind of, it needs to be spring steel, and you don't want it stainless steel because it just doesn't have a lot of strength. So I got looking online and I found some snap rings, and so I got some snap rings in the mail, and I figured this one kind of has some damage on it. I don't know if you can really see it, but it's kind of worn down on the edge. Now I could flip it this way and I think it would be fine, but it looks like that's just a little bit thin there and there, but especially here. So I got this all put back together, and when I went to bed, of course it was like 1 o'clock in the morning when I got this done, and I went to bed and I could not sleep that night thinking about that snap ring. I was like, well, there's no way that the bearing failed first. It was definitely the snap ring. And if the snap ring is what failed, then why did I just put this back together with the original snap ring? I kept telling myself as I was doing it, well, I can't get another snap ring, so I'll just work with what I got. But as I'm laying there trying to sleep, I'm like, that's not good enough. You know, you got to figure out something better, because that snap ring obviously didn't work. Because the bearing didn't fail and then the snap ring came out. It was the opposite. So something's got to be wrong there. So the only thing I can think of, unless it was just, I don't know, out of wear and tear because the fluid wasn't changed, I don't know, but the only other thing I can think of is that somebody else was in this drive at one point and they used the wrong size snap ring. That's the only thing I can think of. Otherwise, why would that come out? So I spent a half a day trying to find a snap ring locally, just calling everywhere I could think of. Up in Albany, they have a lot of different locations that you can get something like that. And I couldn't find anything. Nothing that was even close. So eventually I just ordered some snap rings, and I ordered 3 different kinds. So this is the first one that came in. This is actually a heavy duty snap ring, which is a little bit thicker. I don't think it'll fit in the groove. The width is still about the same though. If you look at it compared to the other one, that thin width right there is about the same. So I think this would probably work if it would fit in the groove, but I don't even think it would fit. I think it's just too thick. And I was thinking maybe I could just grind it down just so it barely fit in there. So this is another snap ring that I ordered that's the right width. It should be all the right dimensions. But if you look at the width right there, it's still the same as the other one. Now the other one is worn down just slightly. As a matter of fact, let's just measure it. See, 1.81 millimeters. That's the smallest width. 1.82, 1.80. In this one, at the smallest, it's like 1.88. So it's just a little bit bigger. But I figured this being brand new, it will have a better chance of surviving. One thing I noticed was when I put this in here and the spring was putting pressure up on it, these tabs were bent up just a little bit, which indicates that it's under a lot of stress right there. So a brand new one would probably do the trick for a while anyways, but I got something even better. Here's what I found. This is a big upgrade. So this one is the same exact snap ring, except it's got those little teeth in it. This is meant to retain like a gear or something. I don't know exactly what that's meant for. I couldn't think of an application that would work for. But I know it'll work for what I'm doing. This gives it a lot more width to retain this washer, which in turn retains that spring. So I had to wait 2 days to get this, and I just got it in the mail. Now let's reassemble everything so that I can sleep at night, because I lost an entire night of sleep over this whole thing, and this reassures me that this is a big upgrade and this will never fail again. So the first thing we need to do is put the spacer on the bottom first, then the spring, then another spacer. We need to compress that down and then put that snap ring in there. And of course, once I was done assembling everything, I had help to put the drive motor on the floor, because you can't do that by yourself. As a matter of fact, with 2 people, you're struggling with every bit of strength that you got to do that. So we got it down there, and then I proceeded to have to take it all apart again. So now we're going to work on everything we can up here, and I'm not putting that back up on the table. So we're going to deal with everything we can up here and then put it into the drive motor down there. So in order to compress this spring, I need to put something in there to pull it down, but it can't be something that gets in the way of the snap ring. So the way I actually did that before was to utilize this valve spring compressor. But being that this has these extra tabs on here, I'm not sure if I can still use it, but let's find out. Nice. That went very smoothly. Look at that. I'm definitely very happy with that. That's not going anywhere. Not only is it a brand new snap ring, but it's got those tabs on it. I think we're good to go. This should never happen again. I am so glad that I tore this whole thing apart to do this, because that would have been eating at me for a while. Even if the machine worked good for a while, every day I would have been thinking about that. Because if you think about it, it just makes sense. There's no way that that spring came out of there without that retaining clip coming out. And when I pulled it apart, that retaining clip was out. So it had to have come out somehow. And it didn't break. And if you think about the other end of this equation, there really is no reason for that bearing to ever fail. It's constantly soaked in oil. That should never fail. As long as there's oil in there, it's always getting lubricated. And there's only force going sideways like this on it. And it's not even that much. There should never be any thrust pressure on it, or thrust force. So because that retaining ring came out, that spring was riding on the bearing, which it's not supposed to. So I know we thought a $15 bearing was the failure of this whole drive motor, but I'm 99.99% sure that a 39-cent snap ring was actually the cause of it. This was the effect of it. I'm just going to put a little assembly lube right on this swash plate. That way it doesn't run dry. Probably don't need much. Okay, so the way this works is, first there's this tapered piece right here. This piston retainer rotates on that, so you can see it's got an angled portion to it. So this retainer is going like this the whole time this drive motor is going. So then after that, we're going to have a piston block that goes on, but there's 3 little retaining pins that go in here, and they're a real pain. These retaining pins go right into this little groove here. Inside of this piston block, on the bottom of it, there's 3 little grooves, and these pins go into those grooves. And I got some assembly lube on them to keep them in place. These are a pain, because now you got to put this on here carefully without disturbing those pins. They have to get locked into the teeth that's on this shaft here. Now I got to put the pistons in. Which I could actually do it like that to make it easier. And I got assembly lube on all this because these pistons want to slide real easy. And when you're installing this, I'll show you the reason why you don't want that. Okay, so now this is ready to get installed inside of the drive motor. Just like that. So now this whole thing needs to drop in here without losing the pistons, because Because if you drop the pistons too low, then those pins come out. Actually, I think I got it pretty good. It took me a couple tries on the first time, but I think we're good now. I think what it is I used enough assembly lube this time where the pistons stayed put until the whole drive shaft was put in there. So now we can put our parking brake assembly in. So you want to start with friction because there's a little groove on the bottom. You can see that it wants you to put the friction in first. Otherwise this assembly will stack up too tall. So friction, steel, friction, steel, friction, steel, friction, steel. So you always want to end up with the steel on the top because our springs put pressure on the steel. You wouldn't want them to put pressure on the friction because the friction will be moving. The steel is stationary and the friction turns with this drive shaft and the piston block. So the way this parking brake works is this right here is the rotor, if you will, that puts pressure downward onto the friction plates. Well, it first starts on the steel plate and then transfers to the friction. So this right here has O-rings in it on the side, and this just goes right in here, and it's a pretty tight fit, but it's not like pressed because it needs to move. So you want to start out with this pretty straight, and then you can push down. If you don't start out with it pretty straight, you can booger up the O-rings. I'm just using the handle of a hammer, it's rubber. So the way the parking brakes work is there's these springs on the top, and the housing that you put on compresses this. So this being like a caliper on a car, I guess, kind of the caliper and the rotor, it's always pushing on the brakes. So that's why a track skid steer is locked up until you start moving it. The tracks are always locked up because the friction is always being put on those friction plates with these springs against the housing. So when you start using a control, the first thing the charge pump does is give pressure to this port right here, and this port brings pressure down, around, and back up again, and forces this plate upward, which takes the tension off of those brakes. And as soon as that loses pressure, these springs push this plate down and it puts friction on those plates again. It makes everything so it locks right up. So that's how the parking brakes work on this. It's pretty nifty. And all the while that I'm talking about all this stuff, I'm looking at that and I'm thinking, man, that's definitely gonna work. I'm loving it. I'm gonna sleep like a baby tonight. So you can see with all them springs, and they're compressed down pretty far too. That's a lot of tension on those parking brakes. That's why they're so good. That's why when you load a track skid steer on a trailer, it doesn't move at all. You almost don't even need to strap it down. The brakes are so good on them. Alright, so you don't need a press to do this or anything. I'm just going to use a socket and a brass hammer. This goes right on there. You can hear when it bottoms out, so now that's good to go. it's not really that tight of a press either, and neither is the press on the outer brace there. That goes into the housing pretty easily. So you can see this whole assembly's got a little bit of play, but that's because the bearing is like 10 inches down from there, the bottom bearing. So with this bearing on the top being put in the housing, it locks that shaft right into place so that the top and bottom both can't move. So this housing needs to be flipped over and put on here, and there's this port plate right here, valve port plate here, and like I said, the pressure goes through this side, it goes forward, this side is reversed, or vice versa, I'm not sure exactly which one. But so this plate stays stationary, this piston block obviously rotates, and then the swash plate on the bottom is stationary. And so it's almost kind of like an electric motor in a way, if you can kind of think of it like that. But anyways, I need to put this on here, and it has to be clocked in the right position because there's these ports right here. One is for the parking brake, and one just goes to a blank, which has an open port. I don't know what that would be used for, but I'm assuming in a different application it might be used for something else. Maybe the parking brake is on one side on one drive motor, on the other side on the other, for left and right, I don't know. But in any case, these are those two ports right here, and on this one it's this side that's the parking brake. So when I put this on here, it will actually be that one. So that's the parking brake. This one's identical, but it's just blocked off. There's nothing there. It's just got a cap there. So the tricky part is putting this on here and keeping this aligned while it's flipped over. So I put some assembly lube on here to kind of really give it some friction so it doesn't want to fall off. And you got to quickly put it on there, line up the springs, and press it down before this falls down. That took me a few tries last time, so let's see if we can get it better this time. I totally forgot that this has to be clocked as well. So this port right here has to be all the way between here. Totally forgot about that. Should be able to just use a bar and twist it. About there. And now that hole right there is to fit this dowel right here. You know, and it's a good thing this just fought me, because it didn't want to align itself, and now I see why. It's kind of a good thing when that happens, because it didn't let me go any further until I got it right. Because if that was clocked wrong, there's ports that are on the side that this fluid shoots out, and I think that that would have messed that up, and I wouldn't have been able to release the parking brake. So it's a good thing that they do stuff like that. So now let's try this again. Perfect. Look at that. I don't want to tighten one side all the way yet because it's kind of better to kind of evenly do it so that you don't pinch something with the springs. So if you watched the first video I did on this skid steer, you saw that I had an extremely hard time getting this drive motor out of the skid steer. The main reason, these fittings right here stick out. So I had to cut little notches in the frame, very small, not going to affect anything, but it still barely slid out of there. So I don't want to face that going back in, because I'm actually going to attempt to put this in by myself with a transmission jack, because it's the weekend, and I'm not going to wait until Monday to get help to do this. So I want to take these fittings off and find a plug to plug in there, and then hopefully that will allow me to put this back in so much easier, and then I'll just put these back in afterwards. I need to keep everything really clean because I don't want to end up with contamination in the hydraulic ports there.
You're...
This patch is here.
Well, first off, this needs to be shifted this way a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because the holes aren't lining up.
Okay.
Do you want me to twist it?
If you can.
Okay, I guess I'll just get dirty. Is this on, like, where it won't fall?
I wouldn't put your feet underneath of it.
Well, my foot was just underneath it. Where? Okay, wiggle it again.
Twist.
Yeah, it's...
Tired.
Seems like I might have something now. Do I have it?
I think this is too high up, though.
Well, you can take that board out from underneath.
Born out.
Are you sure?
It's not going anywhere.
Are you sure?
Put that,
Which one?
put
The
that,
little one or the big
Both
one?
of
Or...
them.
Okay.
put that.
It's not going anywhere. It's a 500-pound strap.
Okay, well...
Put that, put that. Mom, Dad.
Hang on, bud. Hang on. Hang on, dude.
Okay, well... You're gonna have to do this quick. Okay. I'm gonna have to push and...
Put that, put that.
Okay, go now!
Oh, born out.
It's like not. It might be. Maybe it's.
Okay, it's completely lined up. I have it lined up with the thing. But you need to do it now.
Okay. It seems like it's going in. Is it going?
Oh, if I move, this whole thing's gonna move, so...
Well, once it's started, it's not a big deal.
I can't see anything. Yeah, it's in. Keep going.
You don't have to stress yourself. Then it's in.
Yeah, but this keeps, if this moves, I think that's what keeps happening, is it keeps
No,
shifting.
once it's in, it's in. It wasn't in before. It wasn't spread.
Put it down a bit. Mama. Hey.
What?
Hey, Dad.
I don't want that. Okay,
Hey.
did you do it?
Yeah.
Okay, head back inside, please.
Did you want me to stick the, for you?
So I got the first couple bolts in. That's really the hardest part. It's all aligned now, so now it's just a matter of putting, let's see, I got 4 bolts in, so I guess I gotta do the other 4. I think 5 of them are on the top, and then you gotta go underneath and get the other 3. But this ratchet works pretty good because you can kind of flex it where you need. But before I go on the bottom, I'm going to start hooking up the lines, because that's probably one of the hardest parts, because I got to put those adapters on first, keep everything clean, and then actually put the actual lines on. But yeah, there's not a lot of room to work here. But it's going better than I expected going back in. A lot easier than taking it out, I can tell you that much. Just the fact that there's no debris in there. Grease and oil and leaves and sticks and twigs and mud, sand, clay, whatever else was in there. Rat droppings. Just so nice not to have all that stuff in there. Everything's nice and clean. You know, thinking back, I was in a rush when I was taking this out. I should have just took those adapters out, and then I could have easily got this out, but I thought I was doing the right thing by keeping them plugged up. But I could have plugged them with a, because I don't have the right plug for that, so I had to use the Rhino plugs, the little rubber plugs, but that works just fine. I don't see any problem with that. So I should have done that. So now I know if I ever have to do this again, that's what I'm gonna do. Okay, get that plug out. Take our little stubby wrench, which would have made my life a lot easier before. Oh, that was easy. Next one. I would put you guys a little closer to see what's going on, but there is literally no place to put a light or a camera or even my hand. We're about 5, maybe 6 inches from the engine right here. Not a lot of room. Most of it's just feeling your way around. So again, we're down to just feeling our way around. There's no seeing anything. But you guys can go down here. I don't know, maybe you can see something there.
Well, you guys can see something, but I can't. I know it's crooked and I'm having a hard time straightening it out. That's the next hardest one to do.
right there. Now for the easy one. You always want to do the easy stuff last. That's always how I work. Okay. Okay. Alright, hoses are done. I just got to put in those other 4 bolts from underneath. Now if you can see that bolt back there through that hole, but that's what I'm up against. I know I said I was gonna test this before putting it in the machine, but at this point there's no way that this couldn't work. So rather than go and get a bunch of hoses and spend a bunch of money, half a day going to get the hoses and stuff, it'd take me less time to just put it in. So before we run this machine, I'm going to plug up this port, and then I'm going to fill this port. I'm going to use some 545 Loctite rather than thread sealer. I've been using this for everything to do with pneumatics and hydraulics, and it works great. It has never leaked. And a few viewers recommended this, and can't tell you how many times I've used it. It's great stuff. Okay, so this just wants SAE 90, but I'm gonna use some 7590. This is really good stuff. Alright, so at this point I have everything hooked back up, and to test this out, I don't want to put the tracks on yet. I don't want to put the sprocket on. I just want to test it out the way it is. So what I've done is unhook the pilot lines from the right track, and because that's not off the ground, so with this being off the ground and only the pump for the left track is controlled right now, I should be able to, in theory, start this up and just see if that spins. If it goes back and forth and everything sounds good, then I'll put the tracks back on and I'll drive this out of here. Alright, awesome. So very promising right there. And as a bonus, I looked underneath and no fluids are dripping, so I think we're really good here. So let's put these tracks back on by myself. I'm so excited I could care less about straining myself putting these tracks on. I'm sure it'll be fine in here anyways. It's easier when you're outside and you can actually operate the thing, but or if you have another person, but I don't have either option right now, so I'm just gonna struggle. So I drove this machine around outside a little bit. It works good. Everything's working the way I want it to. So moving right along, let's get to the next project here, which is going to be replacing the seals in this lift cylinder. So I'm going to unpin it right here. I'm going to leave that side pinned. That way I can have something to resist the force of taking out this gland nut. And these are leaking pretty bad actually. So it's something I wanted to address immediately after I got the drive motor fixed. So let's get right into it. So to keep things as clean as possible, now that I got that cracked, I'm going to go over here and cap and plug these lines. That way it's just the fluid that's in the cylinder that's coming out, nothing more. So obviously you have to support the arms while you're doing this. So I got jack stands underneath each part of the frame here, or the loader arm. And I also need to fix this, so I figured that way I can take care of two things at once and not have to move those jack stands. And according to my calculations, I should have just enough room to slide that all the way out before it hits that arm. I'm hoping. It's gonna be close. Alright, so my measurements were a little bit off. Got a few more inches to go. So we got to pop this back pin off. These things work great for doing this. This is a boot tray that I got from Home Depot for like $12, and it's like a rubberish material, so you can put it there to catch fluids and it doesn't mar up anything that's steel or even brass or anything. You know, this seal doesn't really feel that bad. I don't know. I guess it probably doesn't take much to leak here, but this should be the seal that's leaking. Alright, so I don't know what kind of seal kit I got here, but these two O-rings are supposed to go here, I'm assuming, and one's bigger than the other, which that shouldn't be. These seem to be correct, but I just noticed that there's no piston seals in the kit. The only seal I see in there is this one. Luckily, these piston seals seem to be good, but yeah, I don't know why that would be like that. So I guess I gotta carefully take these O-rings off because I might have to reuse them. I don't know why one would be bigger than the other. Look at that. That's probably why this one's leaking. That's the rod seal inside of this cap here. See, I was able to do it like this time because I raised up the boom a little bit more. I guess I could have done that last time too, but I just thought it was easier to take the back pin out, but I didn't realize putting it back in would be hard. So that's why I don't want to go through that again. So from rebuilding the other cylinder a little while ago, I learned a few things. Number one, I'm going to leave these piston seals alone, which that's what I did on the last rod anyways, but also these white seals right here are not the right kind. The ones that I got, when you stretch them to go over here, they're way too big and then they don't fit. So I'm just going to replace the O-rings that are right next to them, and I'm going to leave those seals alone. When I stretched that over that gland nut there, it stretched them out too much and they wouldn't go back to how they were before. I tried putting heat to them, I tried cooling them down, I couldn't get them to shrink again. So what I ended up doing was, number one of these was a split ring, so I put that one back. The other one wasn't, so I just took one of these new rings and I just cut it and put it in there. And that's how I had to deal with that. But they look fine. I don't think that they actually seal anything up. I think that they're actually more of a, like a squash ring. Like, in other words, so the O-rings, when they get squashed, they push against those so that they don't get, so that the O-ring doesn't squash too much. I don't think that these actually seal anything. I think it's more or less just to take up some space in there. That's the seal that would make this leak. And there's supposed to be like a little lip on the inside of this, but it's just flat. It's kind of hard to see because you can't look at it from the side, but right on the bottom here, on the bottom, there's a lip, and it's totally gone on this one. This is a backup ring, and for some reason the ones that I got don't come split like this, which would be so much easier to put in. That's the backup ring they gave me. Alright, so that wasn't really rebuilding or repacking the cylinders, but it was fixing the cylinders. So I worked the arm a bunch of times and no leaks. I really wanted to replace all the seals in there, but it just wasn't going to happen. I'm not going to wait a week for more seals, and I fixed the seal that was bad. So neither one of the cylinders leak. It's time to move on. So let's address this. So being that this is so twisted, this is like in and this is out a little bit. You can see the difference in the cylinder. The rod is sticking out more on this side. I think the best thing is to just disattach these top pins, let this flop down, and then I'll correct it and then I'll hook it back up, because these cylinders are not going to equalize themselves. So you have to get this straight and then the cylinders will equalize themselves. If I was outside doing this where I could run the machine a few more times without having to worry about fumes, then I could basically stick this down on the ground, push down, and then it would kind of even itself out, but I don't really have that option in here. So I've been going back and forth about how I want to do this. The right way to do it is to cut like this, and the same thing over here, cut that, and then put like a diamond shaped piece in the middle. That way you have more weld and it's not in the direction where it's going to crack. But this could be a big project if I get into that. Between cutting this out here and then on top and on the back side and doing the same thing over here underneath, it just gets into a lot of complicated cuts. I'm sure I can make it work, but it would take a lot longer. So I think what I'm going to do is just do straight cuts on here, and then I'll put the new piece in, and then I'll make plates to go over top of it. That'll be like this. They'll have a 45-degree angle to overlap the welds, and then that way it's just reinforced so that it's not just the weld that you're relying on, plus it brings the welds out like that. So I think that's just a lot easier than trying to fiddle with these cuts like this, because once this is put together and it's tacked the way I want it, and then I weld it up nice and everything's good, then reinforcing it with plates that are shaped however they're shaped is easy. so I got this plate here. I got the same on the back side. So now I want to get the top and the bottom. The problem is the steel that we got is just a little bit proud there. It's about, I don't know, 3/32, so a little bit over 1/16 of an inch. So I just cut these little plates to go here, just to kind of make up that space. And then we're also gonna plate the top with the same kind of plate that I have here, just thinner obviously. And we'll just bring it short here. good. I mean, it's not a new machine, but it's
New to you.
doesn't leak, it doesn't complain, doesn't make too much noise. It's good. Good.
Get the rock out.
We eating rocks?
So, I'm pretty happy with this machine. Paid $4,000. I got, I don't know, $100 in parts. I was looking it up, and this is actually the first compact track loader that was available on the market. So that's kind of cool. It's like having a regular Nintendo. Eventually, this thing will be worth a lot of money. So, it did take a lot of time to fix this, but I learned a lot of things along the way. So that in itself kind of paid for all that time. And then obviously, I also have a nice track skid steer now with pilot controls. So obviously, this isn't going to have all the creature comforts of other skid steers, but honestly, it's not too much worse than both of these, because neither one of these have a full cab. None of them have heat, air conditioning, or anything like that. So this really isn't too bad for me. My plan for this is to probably bring this up north at my off-grid property and just leave it there, because it'll do everything I need to do up there. Eventually I want to get a real track loader up there, but for right now this is available and it'll do everything I need to do. I did want to paint the whole machine in this episode, but I feel that that's just a little too much work to take on for a machine that I haven't really tested out much. So let me work this a bunch more, and then let me know if you guys would like to see me paint this, because I would like to see it painted. It kind of deserves it, but at the same time I don't know that for sure because I haven't run it long enough. So let me run it and kind of let it earn its keep, and then we'll think about painting it. But I guess there's not much else to say about it, so That's it for this video, and that's it for this series on this skid steer, and I will see you guys on the next video.